For England fans, and indeed fans across the world, Jude Bellingham is often classified as a generational talent, often touted as England's key link to finally achieving success after all the years of hurt. Indeed, at the age of 22, Jude Bellingham has already had a huge impact on England's performances at major finals. But there's a problem. I was browsing through the internet, as you do, looking on YouTube, noticing certain articles, and a lot of them started to have this similar theme, particularly after England's recent victory against Serbia. The arrival of Thomas Tuchel as England manager has probably emphasised these issues actually, because unlike Gareth Southgate, we feel like he's probably going to be a manager who won't sit on the fence and certainly won't be afraid of upsetting the apple cart. The problem, or what appears to be the problem, is that Jude Bellingham and his family seem to be at conflict both on and off the pitch, and as a result, people are now even starting to ask the question, are England better without Jude Bellingham? Now, for 90% of fans across the world, you'd be looking at us and thinking, are you absolutely mental? How on earth can England be better? A talent such as Jude Bellingham, how can we be better without him on the pitch? Well, let's look at some of the rumours. After England's last performance, which was a very impressive 5-0 victory against Serbia, it was Thomas Tuchel's press conference and the comments he made in that press conference in particular that caught the attention. Thomas Tuchel stated, there was no attitude after a mistake, there was no frustration, there was no waving, there was no eyeballing, and there was no bad words. It was just a team ready to work and put 90 minutes of effort in. If a big player misses out on a tournament, we need to have solutions. If he misses a camp, we need to have solutions. We have to focus on the guys who are available and who are ready to be the best versions of themselves and the best teammate possible. This is what we did. Now, after the game, many took to Reddit, Twitter, and indeed the mainstream media. This article was actually taken from ESPN, and many people started to speculate, were these comments sort of a backhanded reference or remark against Jude Bellingham? It's been well reported that even within Tuchel's short time in charge of England, Bellingham's behaviour on the pitch hasn't been popular with Thomas Tuchel. Following England's loss to Senegal in a friendly game back in June, Tuchel was talking to TalkSport after the game and described Jude Bellingham's antics as, I quote, repulsive. He later apologised, blaming it on his English skills, suggested it was something to do with how his grandma described it or something. However, given the way that Bellingham and his family have reacted in the past, this may not have gone down very well. Bellingham has often been described as a little bit of a loner in the England camp, with only, apparently, Trent Alexander-Arnold as his only friend. Famously, after England's European final defeat against Spain, Bellingham did come out in the press and say he felt like a scapegoat at that tournament. He said to the press, I've got to be honest, I lost my smile after the Euros when it came to playing for England because I felt I was a little mistreated in comparison to what I contributed. I felt like some of it was a bit harsh on me. I felt like I was a bit of a scapegoat. Maybe I was feeling a little bit sorry for myself. Just before I carry on here, if you're enjoying this content and you're new, please hit the subscribe button. I am only a small YouTube channel following the England national team, and it really helps me out a lot. Thank you very much. Back to the video. Now, already you can start to sort of see the cracks that are appearing in this Jude Bellingham relationship with England and the FA. It does appear he seems to have quite a fragile ego and seems to single himself out from the rest of the group, or that's at least what it seems from the outside looking in. Famously though, it is also quite unclear how well Bellingham's celebration went down after his famous bicycle kick in the round of 16 against Slovakia. That took England into extra time. We were moments away from going out. Obviously, it was a fantastic goal. During his celebration, Jude Bellingham was seen mouthing the words, who else? Doesn't exactly scream a team player, does it? It has been reported that some players in the England camp really reacted negatively to that, and it was sort of a disrespect that Jude Bellingham was showing to his teammates. How true that is, I don't know, but ultimately this is a team full of egos. Over the years though, since Bellingham and indeed his brother Joe have burst onto the scene, there's been a lot of rumours in the mainstream press, in particular their father, Mark Bellingham, who has often been described as quite a hostile character. Oliver Holt wrote a great piece on the Daily Mail, which I found on Reddit shortly after the Serbia victory. Within it, he highlighted certain problems with Mark Bellingham and the issues he's been causing regarding the international and club setup, both for Jude and for Joe Bellingham. And Oliver highlights in particular the power that Mark Bellingham seems to potentially hold with the FA as a result of his son, Jude, being arguably one of the biggest stars in world football. Oliver particularly refers to a moment when he was speaking to Mark Bellingham about his son Jude, but apparently Mark took this in the wrong way and stated, which son? He said, I've got two sons, you know. He went on, his voice charged with anger. Oliver says he apologised and said he had meant his older son, that it was a stupid mistake to make. And then Mark Bellingham apparently replied, it really pisses him off that people don't acknowledge the fact that he's got two sons. Oliver then goes on to say, I should have accepted defeat at that point, but I kept digging. I told him my best mate had been taught French or something by Mr. Bellingham's dad at Southend School, unofficial or something along those lines. And apparently Mark Bellingham almost shrugged him off, saying, yeah, and just basically ignored him, really. He describes that, though, as that being mild for Mark Bellingham's standards, and more members of the written and broadcast media have their own war stories. And he does go on to talk about those in the article, and it's probably where I'm going with this. It becomes a lot more interesting, particularly in regards to Jude's relationship with the FA and playing for England. So stick with me on this. These are longer quotes, but really worth digging into. So Oliver continues talking about one of his colleagues who met Mark, and he states he wanted to ask Mark Bellingham about rumours of Jones' impending move to Dortmund from Sunderland because it was going to disrupt him being involved in the 21 European Championships. When asked the question, the journalist was met with a stream of invective that was unpleasant enough and hostile enough for him to be startled and angered by Mark Bellingham's behaviour. Later, the FA, whose officials were said to be mortified by what had happened, apologised to the journalist. I was very sorry that he'd been made to feel that way, an FA spokesman said. I said I was sorry that it had happened on our premises. A witness to the incident at St George's Park was puzzled by some of the body language around the incident. They thought it strange Mark Bellingham seemed to be treated like a dignitary after the match. And this is the crux of the problem. To some, it seems strange that the FA chooses to indulge Mark Bellingham's antics, particularly when his attitudes towards many good and extremely able people in their own organisation is often said to be dripping with disdain. They do not deserve that, but the truth is that the game's governing body is in an invidious position. Now, the reality is, obviously, Oliver clearly feels burnt by Mark Bellingham here, and he's perhaps sticking up for journalists in general, but it does seem like there's no smoke without fire in this instance. Now, he goes on to highlight the issues that the FA now have as a result of this sort of strange relationship and influence that Mark has in the England camp. So he says, consider, for example, Jude Bellingham made his senior England debut in November 2020. He has won 44 caps in the last 5 years and has never once spoken to the English media in the formal briefings, routinely organised by the FA in the build-up to an international. Every other player steps up. Jude fulfills his contractual obligations and nothing more. This has come from other avenues where, and other sources seem to be bubbling this rumour that other players in the England camp haven't been happy with Jude Bellingham's engagement with the press, and it seems like, or at least from the other players' perspective, it appears that he's getting some sort of preferential treatment. So he goes on to say some may think that he's utterly unimportant. There are even some journalists who think press conferences tiresome and irrelevant. But he says the point is that every other England player over the last 30 years has fulfilled his media duties within England setup when asked at least some of the time. And he goes on about how everybody else fulfills their duties, and then he goes on to say some believe Mark Bellingham's hostility towards the media and Jude's reluctance to speak to the English media outside his contractual obligations has become a damaging point of division within the squad. Other England players have wondered why Jude Bellingham should be a special case. He then goes on to say many ex-players and observers have started to notice that Bellingham often seems a man apart from England get-togethers. The FA are eager to get Jude to fall into line with standard media duties, but they are too afraid to take on his father, which I think's really quite a statement for Oliver to make here, because he is clearly now drawing the line in the sand and saying that actually Mark Bellingham is a huge problem in this. Why exactly, he goes on to say, they are afraid is unclear, but many believe it is because they are fearful that forcing the issue would prompt Mark Bellingham to withdraw Jude from England commercial appearances, and that they are not willing to countenance the financial hit that they would take if that happened. Jude Bellingham at 22 is commonly regarded as the team's leading player, and he goes on to say essentially how important Jude Bellingham is as a commercial arm for the FA. This isn't just a problem for Jude neither. I definitely think Mark Bellingham's a problem because, of course, famously publicised over the past few weeks as well has been Mark's involvement in Jude's brother at Dortmund, where apparently only recently he kicked off at the Dortmund manager in the tunnel because his son was substituted, and it's meant that as a result Dortmund have had to ban him and other people from that tunnel area during game times. So it does seem that Mark is very much a problem, but it also seems that the FA are sort of trying to do damage limitations here and have a fine balance to the way they handle Jude and his father, as well as allow him to express himself on the pitch and be that sort of player he wants to be. But it's clear that Thomas Tuchel also seems to be potentially having some issues with Jude as well. But ultimately, it's important to realise that there is no smoke without fire, but we are also on the outside looking in. We're not fully aware. This is only one side of the story. Of course, it's mainly the pressers. We haven't heard from Jude or Mark. It's a difficult one to weigh up. I think England fans do sort of sense, even as fans who watch Jude on the pitch, we know he's got that fiery side. We know he's got that edge. We know he can potentially probably be quite difficult just based on his attitude and the way he presents himself on the pitch. Now, some England fans believe that that's exactly what England need, or exactly what we've been missing over these 60 odd years. That fire, that passion, that energy to win, no matter what. about the player who's dragging the other players through, a potential true captain of the future. However, there is that other flip side, and I know for a fact, even on this channel when I've been doing my live streams and covering other games, how many times, I've lost count of how many times other England fans on this channel have commented saying they hope Jude Bellingham doesn't cost us in a quarter-final, round of 16, semi-final, final, whatever it is, by getting himself sent off. We understand as England fans that he may actually cost England at a tournament, and it is a fear that I think a lot of England fans have. Can Jude really control himself when it matters? Can Thomas Tuchel and the FA control Jude Bellingham? No player should be or is bigger than a team, particularly not the international team, and particularly in a squad where we are so stacked in that area of the pitch. Yes, they may not be as strong as Jude Bellingham. He's playing in an area where there are lots of options, and Tuchel has been brought in to win the World Cup, and I don't think he'll be afraid to drop a player like Jude if he feels it's in the best interest of the team. So is Jude Bellingham a problem? Well, the fact that this keeps coming up, you could argue, yes, he probably is. He is a big problem for Tuchel to try and fix, because there is clearly some sort of problem there. But I think he's worth sticking with, isn't he? Because he's that good. He really is that good, and it's about how we can find that balance. I think Mark is probably the bigger problem and a huge influence on Jude. I do think we have the right manager in place, though. Thomas Tuchel will not be afraid to make those tough decisions. And it does sort of raise the possibility that there is a world here where Jude Bellingham could be fit, ready to play, but may not start at the World Cup. I know that sounds absolutely absurd, but there's a long time between now and the start of the World Cup, and there's a few camps left, and it's going to be interesting to see how Thomas Tuchel manages this. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think Jude Bellingham's a problem? Do you think we just need to grin and bear whatever the issues are? Or should he be dropped? Is he already a problem? Is it going to cost us moving into the future? Will he be a risk at the World Cup? I think there's some interesting points on this one. Great discussions to be had. Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. Once again, please hit the subscribe button if you're new here, and I will see you all on my next video.